everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Cliff and this is my channel, Cliff's Dark Gems. Today we're going to be talking about underappreciated horror. Now when I say underappreciated, I mean one of three things. Number one, horror that is little known, horror novels and authors. Number two, horror authors that are fairly well known, but I hear very little about them on BookTube or Goodreads, and they perhaps don't have the best reputation, or people just don't know enough about them. Number three, books that are perhaps in other categories like dark fantasy that I think should be given more love by the horror community. Stay tuned. Hello everyone, before we start I'd like you to just meet my daughter Layla. Say hello Layla. Say hello my dear. Okay. Good girl. Do you want to read a book about fairies? Now I do not mean the fairies that are gentle and safe and beautiful and with those little gossamer wings. I mean fairies that are alien, sinister, dangerous. Fairies that can harm you, even destroy you. These fairies can psychologically assault you, even sexually assault you. And that reminds me, this book has trigger warnings. Violence of a sexual nature, hints of perhaps rape and sexual disturbances. So just be warned, they're only hints, but if this is a problem for you, you might not want to read this book. From the author of one of the most beloved fantasy tales of all time, Magician, which I will definitely speak about when I start talking about fantasy on my channel, you have Raymond D. Feist. And this is Raymond D. Feist's fairy tale. The basic story is that a rich family move into a rural home. They do have a lot of money, which becomes important later on in the novel. And this home is bordered by woodlands. And in these woodlands, you guessed it, are fairy folk. And their intentions are far from friendly. They are dangerous. In this book there is a crossing of the magical world, the fairy world, and the reality that we live in. And that kind of interlaps, which causes confrontations between the humans and the family and the fairy folk. The story is at times uneven. It stretches out a bit, I think in the middle bits or towards the beginning, where sometimes not a lot happens. But the characters are pretty well fleshed out, particularly the children. And the interesting thing about this book, which is in case of so many horror books, if you look at Stephen King's It, is that it's the children that are the target of these creatures, these aliens, I like to think of them. And they're the ones that actually need to be strong. They're the ones that have to stand up to the evil. I don't want to say anything else about that because that is a spoiler. Okay, they have to stand up. It's not the parents. The tone of this book is dark, and there's an underlying sense of dread that runs throughout the novel. This is a dark novel. It is not for children. It is, in places, absolutely terrifying, and I think it is a must for any horror lover. I've read so much of Raymond Feist's work, and this is his first standalone novel, and it's the first time that he has dipped his toes into the horror genre. Well worth a go. And now for something completely different. This is a zombie apocalyptic tale on steroids, plus black ops, plus guns, plus politics. What I give to you is Wet Work by Philip Nutman. Now, Clive Barker recommended this book. He calls Philip Nutman a vital and original talent. The very sad thing about this book is that this is the only book that this author ever wrote. He died in 2013, which is very sad because we cannot now see his progress as a writer. And I love this book, and it is underrated. It actually has only 200 or so ratings on Goodreads, so people don't know about it. He could have been a wonderful author. Well worth read. Something about what the book is about. Two very different men, a covert assassin for the CIA and a rookie cop face a living nightmare as the world collapses around them. It's basically Armageddon, the end of the world. A comet leaves a trail of sickness, where common colds are fatal, and where the dead rise up and take over, hungry for flesh and blood. Now the big catch in this book is that not all the dead are mindless zombies. The dead, many of them, have their human intellect actually working, and they even drive cars and operate cell phones. They even have the capacity to trick humans, make traps for humans, and this makes this an incredibly original take on the zombie genre. This book is extremely fast-paced. It's a page-turner. It mixes the genres of almost like a crime thriller, a zombie horror, and it is gory as hell, but it's a hell of a lot of fun to read. I'd highly recommend this book to anyone who enjoys the splatterpunk kind of gore category of horror. That is Wet Work by Philip Nutman. Next up, we have a cheesy 70s creature feature starring giant vampire bats. These bats go around killing humans and animals alike, and the question is, can anyone stop them? This is Nightwing by Martin Cruz Smith. The story goes that a Native American witch, I put witch in quotation marks, decides to cast a spell because he's sick of the world. He doesn't like the way the world is going, and particularly because of the invasion of the colonialists and the greed in the Native American land, and basically wants to destroy the world as a result. There is definitely that subtext of corporate greed and the white people destroying and raping the Native American land throughout the novel, but it is done in a very mature way, unlike a lot of 70s novels where there's just racism and all sorts of stuff going on. And I think that's because the author has a hint of Native American blood in him, and so he deals with it in a very sensitive way. The book is set in the Navajo desert, where there's an array of interesting characters, good, bad, some grey areas there as well, but none of the characters are as interesting as these bats. Now these bats are violent, they are creepy, and there are some very good set pieces, terrifying set pieces in caves that give genuine scares. It's a lot of fun to read. I really love the ending as well. The climax is fantastic, and I gave this book 4 stars on Goodreads. It is a fantastic story, well worth picking up. The next book I'm going to talk about is Ghoul by Michael Slade. Now, Michael Slade is a fairly well-known author, but I don't think he's given far any love from much of BookTube and on other horror channels that I go on. And I don't see very good ratings on Goodreads either. I think he deserves a lot more credit for what he's done. He's created this XXX series. I want to show you some other books from the XXX series. Headhunter, Houses for a Cover. As well as Zombie, which I'm putting on my TBR for next month. The interesting thing is that Michael Slade is not just one author. He's a group of Canadian lawyers who specialize in criminal insanity. So this book is not just a horror. This book deals with murder, and it is a murder mystery, and they go into incredible detail with the forensics and with the investigation, which makes the story fantastic. But what is it about? You have a sick psychotic killer. You have a crazy rock band named Ghoul. You have a mounted Canadian mounted police going out in search of the killer, and a whole movie, The Secret, revolves around this troubled family, this very sick, twisted family, and they have a secret. And there's some Lovecraftian moments in this book as well, which makes it very interesting. And as I've said, this is part murder, part crime mystery, and all the different characters in the threads, even though it seems like all over the place at the beginning, they start merging together towards the end, and it is a shattering climax. This book is twisted, sick, but so much fun to read. Some of the scenes in the sewers there are some great moments in this book. Well worth read. Just for some added incentive to reading this book, Robert Bloch from Psycho. Ghoul will raise hackles, eyebrows and blood pressure everywhere. Here is a book that gives you real shock value for the money. And Alice Cooper says, reading Michael Slade is like taking an advanced course in psycho horror. This book is terrifying. Okay everyone, now for a complete change of pace. There is no blood or gore in this book. There are no cheap thrills or little bits of terrifying thrills or races through the street or slashes or anything like this in this book. This is a haunting. This is a subtle, understated novel by a writer that's fairly well known in certain circles. It's almost like he's got a cult following, but I think he needs a little bit more attention. And that is A Manhattan Ghost Story by T.M. Wright. And when I say understated, I mean understated. This is not your normal ghost story. This is not your normal haunting. Let me tell you a little bit about what the story is about. Okay, the very basic plot of the story is that a photographer, Abner Cray, arrives in Manhattan to stay with his friend, Art, to finish his book. And he finds that Art is missing, but inside the apartment is a beautiful woman named Phyllis. Now, he eventually falls for Phyllis. He falls in love with Phyllis. And then comes some devastating news. He finds out that Ollie is on the run from the police as a result of Ollie murdering Phyllis. I repeat, the woman that he was staying with is apparently murdered. There is a slow descent into madness in the story to deal with how he deals with this revelation, but it is slow and it is sad, it's haunting, but there is no sense of terror or dread in this novel. But what we find is that now Abner, it's almost like parts of the world is showing him things in the city. Strange things start to happen. And it's really a story of love and loss and pain as he goes searching for meaning and for what has happened. And it's a love story, but it is a ghost story. And you really have to be in the mood for this story. It's not something for everyone. And if you pick it up and you enjoy haunted stories, like haunted houses, that are a little bit more subtle, as opposed to just throwing in everything, then this might be the book for you. That is T.M. Wright, A Manhattan Ghost Story. I also read Boundaries by the same author, but I didn't really care for it. But after reading this book, I feel like tracking down a little bit more of T.M. Wright. As I say, you've got to be in the mood for it. It's slow, but it's thought-provoking, and every now and then I enjoy a book like this. This final book of mine is a 5-star favorite, and it has been categorized under many different things, different genres. Some people call it dark fantasy, some people call it a fairy tale, some people call it horror, and some people even label it as YA. This is not a YA book. That is the Book of Lost Things. I would say that if you give this to a 10 or 12-year-old, they are not going to be able to sleep for weeks. There is nightmare fuel in this book. Some of the imagery is dark, twisted, nasty, terrifying stuff. Do not let your children read this book. The story goes, it's set in World War II. A young boy named David loses his mother. Now his father falls in love with another woman, and soon enough David has a younger brother, and he is angry, he is upset, he's sad, he has not coped with the loss of his mother. He sits in his room surrounded by her books and her fantasy books, and they start whispering to him. And soon fantasy and reality start merging. And he gets caught up and he gets transported into another world. This other world is dark and dangerous. It has what we would call our commonly recognized fairy tales, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, the Huntsman, all these tales, but they have been twisted into terrible parodies of themselves. There's violence, there's blood, there's gore, and some of it is, I would even argue that some of it makes authors like Stephen King pale by comparison. So it's some nasty stuff in this book. It is not for children. I want to just keep reiterating that. It is a horror. I've seen many people on Goodreads talk about this as an urban fantasy or dark fantasy, whatever, but it has horror elements. And if you're a horror lover, this is a book you should get your hands on. Give it a try, see what you think. There are also some hilarious moments in this forest. I think us as adults will find it hilarious. The tale of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. I'm not going to give any spoilers. You'll have to discover it for yourself. But that is just laugh out loud funny as well as disgusting. But I really think you should read this book. I mean, we have a young David who psychologically has still traumatized by the loss of his mother, and in his mind he hasn't forgiven her for leaving. He has this attitude towards his new mother and his younger brother, and it's almost like it's an internal world that he's trying to cope with what's happening to him in this fantasy world. But it is, as I said, it is well worth a read. Give it your time and let me know what you think if you do read it. Okay everyone, that was my list of underappreciated horror novels, although we did sneak some dark fantasy stroke horror in there. I hope you enjoyed that. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Would you add any other books to that list? Have you read any of these books? Let me know what you think. If you enjoyed the content of this video, please like and subscribe, and look out for my next video where I'll be wrapping up my reading for January. See you soon. Keep those pages turning. Cheers.